I collapsed at the hospital, which is where I worked. But I used to be an Olympic weightlifter and power lifter. I couldn't even lift a 35-pound bar. And around the time that I collapsed, my health just took a deep dive. You think you can take over the whole world? I'm like, I can do CrossFit competitions and work 100 hours at the hospital and do all of this. Lyme disease has got nothing on me. When 2022 hit, I had worked 2 years with minimal time off. The burnout was so bad that I was at a point where I was on the phone with a relative and I just could not stop crying. I was exhausted. So I ended up taking a leave of absence, took a sabbatical. I remember having this experience where I could hear everybody, but I couldn't open my eyes, I couldn't open my mouth. And then I saw my dead grandmother, and I'm someone who's not woo-woo. I'm a scientist. So I'm like, what is happening to me? The irony, the high performance health coach who's been coaching, burnout and stress for the last 3 years, the joke's on me now. I became that person.
Welcome to the Optimized Woman, the podcast for high performing women ready to take back their health. I'm Orshi McNaughton, a board certified holistic health practitioner and functional nutritionist. If you're tired of feeling stuck, you can't lose the weight no matter what you do, your energy is in the toilet, your metabolism feels like it's at a standstill, and you lost the spark you once had, then you're in the right place. We are here to unleash the unstoppable force you're meant to be and give you the tools to fix what's holding you back. So if you're ready to own it, start thriving again and live the life you deserve, and let's get to it. Welcome, friends. Today I'm joined by Jessy Abed, an integrative health practitioner and high performance health coach with over a decade of experience in holistic wellness and advanced cancer care in a traditional hospital setting. In this episode, we discuss strategies for managing stress, optimizing sleep. We talk about contrast therapy, breath work, and personalized nutrition to help build your resilience and longevity. So, without further ado, let's dive right in.
So my parents always taught me prevention is better than the cure. So I would say that while in university, being a competitive swimmer, I dabbled in becoming a personal trainer, a holistic nutritionist. So I've always had one leg in that while the other was in medicine. But about 12 years ago, I got Lyme disease. And that was my first introduction into being on the other side of the coin and realizing that conventional just was not working for me. So that's where my passion for biohacking, what we know now as biohacking, but that's where my passion for biohacking sort of started. And working in the conventional medical system, I saw the missing gap. So it's been more of a passion for me until recent years that I decided to turn it a bit more into like a purpose for
Yeah.
others.
So you mentioned Lyme disease, and how old were you when that happened? Or
Oh, I was in my 30s,
your
early 30s.
30s? And do you know what was the underlying sort of, was it a tick bite, or do you know
Yeah.
specifically what it was related to?
I do actually. I went hiking with a friend and I got bit on my neck. So I
Mm.
distinctly remember having it, but I ignored it. We're from like Barbados. Dengue is like a common thing. We get bit by mosquitoes all the time. So I actually ignored it. And it wasn't until months later that I started walking with a limp and had a bit of like left-sided paralysis that people started noticing. And then I ended up collapsing one day. And that's sort of how I ended up getting diagnosed was typical healthcare practitioner ignoring all the symptoms until it becomes a bigger deal.
I know this is a little sidetrack, but I would love to just hear, what did you have to do to, I'm not sure if you can say cure yourself from Lyme disease, but that can be such a debilitating situation for so many people, and there's such a range or spectrum of how it affects people. So I'm just curious, like, how did it affect you? How long did it take you to overcome that? Are you still suffering with that, or are you completely uh,
Gone.
back to health? Okay, so
Back to health.
what was that journey like for you?
So initially, I didn't know what was happening to me. I was obviously feeling the flu-like symptoms every day, a sore throat. But at the time, I was presenting at an oncology conference internationally, and the stress of being able to present in front of thousands of people where I was invited to. I had just finished my master's degree. So I was operating at an extremely high level of stress. So I assumed that my symptoms were all stress related. And then when I collapsed at the hospital, which is where I worked. Because of that, they forced me on like a 2-month leave. They're like, no, you actually are a liability to the patients. You need to get this resolved. So for me, yes, I was doing all the healthy things, but it was not enough because I used to be an Olympic weightlifter and power lifter. I couldn't even lift a 35-pound bar. And around the time that I collapsed, my health just took a deep dive. So, of course, in the medical system, you're being referred to infection control, neurology, this thing and that. So, after months and months and months, they figured out, oh, it could be this, but we don't really have an option here in Canada. This is mainly tested through the States. Just, keep working at it. We'll recommend X, Y, and Z. So, they recommended a plethora of medications, which I absolutely refuse to take. And I would say back then, because I was into the holistic approach was basically food and exercise. We didn't do all these extra things. So I was on a journey to find extra things. And it just happens in the Caribbean, we always go to salt water. The water is our therapy. So one of my friends recommended I go for another hike with her, not the same area where I got the bite. And I just had a moment. I don't know what overcame me. It was the middle of winter, and something just told me, take my shoes off and get into the water. And it was freezing cold water. And it was the first time that I felt absolutely amazing. So I went down that rabbit hole of what else can I do? Cryotherapy, anti-inflammatory diet, working on my sleep, listening to my nervous system, going slower with movements. And it took about 6 months to a year, I would say, until I was 100% back. But at the time when I finally got the specialist referral, which was a year and a half later, I'm like, thanks, I'm good. Thank you so much for finally bringing me into your system, but I figured it out.
Isn't that true that, and I talk to my clients all the time about the stress bucket, like how full is your stress bucket? And I think a lot of us are very close to the edge, and there's just so much mental, emotional, physical, various types of stress that if there is a new infection, or it can be COVID, it could be something like a tick bite, that then just causes this complete sort of breakdown because we don't
Hmm.
have the resiliency in our system to bounce back, right? Whereas somebody else could have just overcome that infection with no problem, somebody who's really resilient, and somebody who's, I call it the quote unquote stress bucket is full, all of a sudden now you're out for 6 months to a year, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I think this topic today of talking about, burnout and chronic stress and just how do we build stress resiliency for ourselves as women is such a important conversation. So one
Hmm.
of the things you mentioned was cold therapy, right? I mean, for you, it was the ocean. Was that in Barbados where you went into?
No, it was in Toronto.
I
It
was
was the lake.
okay.
It was like
So
a
that
frozen
was really
lake.
cold over there
Yeah, it was
in
really
Canada.
cold, but so I was only off work for 6 weeks, but it took me 6 months or longer to get back. And I have to admit that it was my anxiety being away from my patients because I was working in oncology. I was running research clinical trials, and I felt this sense of failure, and that's what was motivating me. But now that I'm a lot older and I'm looking back at my actions, I recognize now that it was that time to actually decompress that was huge that I didn't take. So even in my recovery, I was trying to do all the fixes every day. I was booking all these sessions with massage and doing this and trying to
Right.
do all the things until eventually I just was like, I'm just tired of t being tired. It's exhausting for me to get out of bed. I'm just going to give in to this. And it wasn't until I started resting that I realized that now looking back, the importance of how much all of this was. And you touched on that. Like when we're stressed out, we don't know that we're stressed out. Like we know, but we don't really know.
Yeah, especially sort of the type A overachiever type of women like us that we literally want to outwork our fatigue and outwork our exhaustion. We're doing more things. Like
Yeah.
instead of working 16 hours, we now schedule 5 appointments and all in the name of self-care, but we want to outwork our fatigue. And sometimes what we are not doing is listening to our body. And our
Hmm.
body is actually telling us like you need to rest. you need to recover, you need to take
Hmm.
it easy, right? But we don't want to hear it.
No, we don't. And actually, thinking back, I was actually in my 20s when this happened, now that I'm doing the math in my head. So you're stubborn and you're young and you think you can take over the whole world. I'm like, I can do CrossFit competitions and work 100 hours at the hospital and do all of this. Lyme disease has got nothing on me. I can kick its butt. But,
Yeah.
you know,
And I think this is one of the biggest differences between men and women is that women experience burnout a lot faster. Our
Mhm.
physiology just built differently. We need more TLC and self-care, and we also need to be more tuned in and listen to our body and not always just think that we can biohack and fix everything.
And unfortunately, that's a lesson that I did not learn until a few months ago. So.
Yeah, so tell us what happened to you just a few months ago.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. As with most people during COVID, it was an insane time for us frontline workers. I was dealing with both cancer and COVID patients. And I was fortunate in the sense I never got COVID. My immune system is pretty strong, so I never even had a cold. But what that meant was I was constantly being the person that was called to cover on call, that was working. So I don't have family in Canada. So for me, this was my distraction. Sure, the world's in lockdown, no problem. And when 2022 hit, I had worked 2 years with minimal time off. The burnout was so bad that I was at a point where I was on the phone with a relative and I just could not stop crying. I was exhausted. So I ended up taking a leave of absence, took a sabbatical, went back to Barbados, started working for a private investor doing biohacking research, medical research, because I used to do medical research for a number of years, 17 years. So that's how I got into the world of biohacking. But again, high performer kicking in. You're doing all this stuff. It's like, this is exciting to me. Okay, I'm starting my company. And then I made the decision to move back to Canada because biohacking is not really here. But I didn't like the definition of biohacking. I wanted to have my own spin on it, especially third world, male driven. Like, no, we're women. We need to be more in research. We have to be more spoken for. So, in my keenness to do that, I ultimately resumed working in radiation oncology as a radiation therapist and 100 hours a week doing that and building my company. But I know good. I know what to do. I'm a biohacker. I optimized my sleep, I optimized my nutrition. I was doing all the things, except I wasn't slowing down. And I had to fly back to Barbados in May for my cousin's wedding. An hour and a half after I landed, I briefly turned to my sister-in-law and I said to her, I don't feel good. I don't even know what was happening to me. I felt myself drifting. I ended up going in and out of consciousness for the next 8 hours, having seizures. I was rushed to the emergency room. I can't even tell you what the hospital looked like. I can't tell you what the doctors looked like. I don't even know what was happening to me. I was so far gone to the point that I remember having this experience where I could hear everybody, but I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't open my mouth. And then I saw my dead grandmother, and I'm someone who's not woo-woo. I'm a scientist. So I'm like, what is happening to me? So whatever higher power there was, I was like, okay, I'll make a deal. If you get me through this, I will quit. I will leave the hospital and I won't do this to myself anymore. I won't do this to my family. And I returned to Canada and went through 2, 3 months of testing to only find out it was literally severe burnout. My body, like Gabber mate, the body says no. My body had enough. They're like, no more, Jesse. You gotta stop. So the irony, the high performance health coach who's been coaching, burnout and stress for the last 3 years, the joke's on me now. I became that person to the extreme.
I empathize with that so much because I've done this to myself so many times, not to the extreme of like having to go to the hospital, but just complete exhaustion and, what we sort of call chronic fatigue, even though it's not a real condition, but it's basically just your cortisol levels are flatlined. Your body is just out of energy and forcing you to rest, basically.
Hmm.
Your metabolism really slows down, and you just go into this state of nothing is working, brain fog, just feeling exhausted, tired, having to take multiple naps in a day. I'm very familiar with this because just like you, as soon as I get my energy back, all my 100 projects are back on my plate, and I
Yeah.
don't know how to go other than 150%
Hmm.
with everything I'm doing. But I think that's partly what makes us good coaches because we've gone through these experiences and been in that shoe ourselves. And so we can easily identify it in other people when they're burned out. I think so many people are in this state, especially interestingly, I've just been speaking to my clients, and right this time of the year when we're going into the fall or the winter, and there's a time change, everything is getting darker, colder, and then you have the holidays coming. This is like the prime time for burnout, and everybody's starting to feel exhausted. So, how
Yeah.
do you navigate that now that you know this? What are your takeaways for yourself? And then how do you coach your clients differently?
Oh, I have to admit, I struggle so much with that. I have no problems dishing the advice out. I have no problems working with my clients, giving them the recommendations of the boundaries, learning to say no, having slower mornings. I think a large part that did help me was that I did leave the hospital. I left a few months ago. So now it's just I'm working on my own practice virtually and I do a lot of speaking events and stuff. It's just I struggle within myself because now that I no longer have that job stability, when the opportunities come, it's like just say yes, say yes, say yes. And it got to the point a few weeks ago where I could feel it happening again. And now I have to become the client. It's like, okay, Jesse, you got to learn to say no. You have to have boundaries. Rome was not built in a day. You can't start running a marathon before you learn to crawl. And if you try, you're just going to injure yourself. So I have to keep constantly reminding myself. I schedule chunks of time in the day. Like my mornings, my slow mornings, I've realized for me is everything. I no longer have to wake up at 4 a.m. and rush out the door to like head into, start treating my patients. I can take that luxury of going a little bit slower. So I do little things that I know that can help, but I'm going to be very honest, it's a struggle. Like you're excited about all the opportunities, you're excited about all the things coming your way. And I don't know if you're like this. I have a hard time shutting my brain off. My brain is going 100 miles a minute. Even in a yoga class, I'm just like, oh, what can I do tomorrow? How can I structure this? Like it's a work in progress. One thing that I've picked up on that for me is next level binaural beats. I do habit stacking with binaural beats, my red light therapy, and that's my way of, at the very least, allowing my brain to have those few minutes to just be calm and cold plunging. Like it's not for everyone, but for me, it does work.
So you mentioned binaural beats, cold plunging. What was the third one?
Oh, red light therapy,
Red light
habit
therapy.
stacking. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So I think just so people can start taking away some nuggets and some takeaways of what are the little lifestyle habits that can be incorporated. And it's not the same for every person.
hmm
Everybody's different. So you have to kind of try what works for you. For
for
Jesse,
sure.
these three habits are sort of managing the stress load. Some of the things that I do is I also have a morning and evening routine. I'm very militant with my bedtime of going to bed on time, and I
hmm
have noticed the earlier I go to bed, the more deep sleep I get, the better my sleep scores are, my Oura ring. I also do a deep sleep non-rest, kind of
hmm
just short session during usually the middle of the day. And now I'm forcing myself to do it even when I'm not tired. So, because in the past, always when I get into this like depleted state is when I bring these habits back. But now I'm
hmm
like, no, I'm gonna preventatively start doing my mindfulness practices so I don't get burnout. And you and I have to take our own medicine, have to take our own advice and actually
Yeah.
really build these habits and routines into your life preventatively because once you burn out, I'm not saying it's too late because it's never too late, but you don't want to get to the point your body is completely shutting down.
hmm
You want to really preventatively manage it and build it into your schedule to have these self-care practices in place. So, Jesse, maybe we could just talk about what else can women do beyond the few things we already mentioned? What are the other things that women can kind of build into their daily or weekly routine. And I would also love it if you expanded a little bit more on the benefits of binaural beats, the benefits of red light, the benefits of cold plunging, and how is that different for women?
So I'm going to circle back when I said that my morning routine is really important. One of the things about biohacking, especially because I come from Barbados where people can't really afford much, is that I like to offer things that you can do that are inexpensive. And, for me, my morning routine, yes, now winter is coming around the corner, but that's no reason to still not get outside. So for me, I usually start with hydration is a big part of it. People, I don't think realize how important it is, but I wake up in the morning, nothing makes me more excited than having my hot water and my ginger and a slice of lemon in my hot water. And I will take my nice slow morning. Sometimes I use my wire headphones walking outside, but other times I just walk and just enjoy nature and being outside, getting that morning sunlight. Even today, we're really lucky in Toronto. It was 19 degrees Celsius. Grounding, taking your shoes off, walking on the earth, just feeling that energy. Those things for me are next level because it helps like recalibrate your system. It also is really good for your circadian rhythm to help get you more synced with bedtime. So those are part of my morning routine that now for me they're non-negotiables. Like I try to do them even I was just away at a conference. I was getting up every morning and still doing that because it helps set me in. You talked about how you ended up doing BDMF, like some sort of like deep rest or non-sleep deep practices during the day. That's where my binaural beats came in. So, what are binaural beats? It's basically your, it's a sound that one ear hears the sound, your other ear hears that sound, and it interprets it as a beat. So I always call it, it's like a massage for your brain. It's synchronizing your brain waves. And depending on what you're looking for, I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I tend to listen to the theta waves that can help get me into like a deep focus and relaxing state because individuals like myself cannot meditate. High performers who are always on the go, our brains are going through our grocery list, things to do. Like it just never ends. The binaural beats for me has been the one way where I'm really able to like disconnect and I can just chime into the sound. So whether that means sitting down, listening to it, if you want to do your skincare routine with it and so forth, your can habit stack if you can want to do it while you're cooking, getting ready for bed. It's part of my bedtime wind down routine. So that's another thing that you can do that's also free. Go to Spotify, download a binaural beat theta wave list, and there you go.
And I definitely recommend listening with headphones so you can
Hmm.
hear the different sounds in the two ears. I think binaural beats is one of the best thing you can do before you go to bed, just as part of your evening routine, a wind down, getting you into that perfect alpha state or even theta state,
Yeah,
depending
for
on what you're
sure.
listening to, but it definitely helps to turn your brain off. And also maybe writing lists. So people that have this monkey mind going on with a lot of intrusive thoughts or kind of repeating thoughts in their head, just getting things out of your head before bedtime, like just writing
Hmm.
a list, maybe having a gratitude journal, a short amount of journaling could be super helpful to get those out of your head. So now you're ready to sleep. Let's cover red light therapy real quick. So red light, if you have a panel, could be a great stack with whatever else you're doing at the same time.
Okay.
So tell us about the benefits of red light.
Oh, wow. There's so many. Collagen rejuvenation, it's from a cellular level, can help rejuvenate your energy. For me personally, I find it very relaxing. And I also am someone that has a few injuries, so I tend to do it on my back as well. It's great for recovery, performance, circulation. So there are a lot of benefits to that. Although I will have to add that it is quote unquote a luxury. Not many people can afford to have a red light panels or to have red light therapy. There are some facilities where you can go where it's available that you can purchase sessions, like a 20-minute, 30 session. There are some who have like the red light for the face. I'm not talking about just the face one though. I am talking about, to be able to get it for your to do in your body so you can allow your mitochondria to help get that little kick off. But I'm going to just add that there are a couple more things that you can do that are free. So you talked about the thought dumping. So I've recognized that for a few months I was doing my morning and my nighttime routine. My wind down routine is important, my morning routine is important, but what about the rest of the day? Us high performers, we can't just all of a sudden, or we shouldn't necessarily be going from like that 8 a.m. when you're doing the kids' school drop off, running around, running into the office, doing this and doing all that. I've learned that there are little tricks, and it does work for a lot of my clients that can help as well. So, taking those moments of breaks, these intentional breaks, not allowing yourself to be like, okay, I'll skip this break. I just want to get this done. No, the most productive thing that you can do sometimes is rest. So, taking an intentional, like 15-minute break throughout the day, like whether it's in the morning and at some point in the afternoon, if you can, going for a little bit of a walk, being assertive with your boundaries. When you come home, that's it. No phone, no work, you're off. So there's all these little tricks that you can incorporate, or I'd say more like habits that you can incorporate that can help women, especially, not get to that level where they just feel like they're taking on the whole world and they don't know how to stop.
I think setting boundaries is just so incredibly important for women because we tend to be the caretakers for everyone in our life. Women that have children take care of their spouse, their parents,
Yeah.
everyone else, and then you still have a job and your own responsibilities. And that just becomes feel like you end up carrying the whole world on your shoulders and that you're responsible for everything and self-care goes out the window, right?
Hmm.
So, setting boundaries with your work, turning as many alerts and notifications off your phone as possible. As a matter of fact, my phone is literally set on silent at all times, like, and have no notifications. I just refuse to be chained, a slave to my phone and try to set my own agenda. So, not other people setting the agenda for me.
Hmm.
I think even in the morning to actually write down maybe the three most important things you want to accomplish because we all have like over 100 things on our to-do
Hmm.
list. So just say,
Hmm.
okay, today these are the highest priorities. And if I don't get anything else done, it's okay. And maybe starting with the hardest thing because I think we have the most willpower in the morning.
Hmm.
So
It's
if you
actually
can,
true. I read
yeah.
somewhere that you run out of, it's sort of like an energy fatigue. So your most important task you should do first thing in the morning, and that's when you're the most productive. So,
Yeah, I have to do my weightlifting in the morning, first thing in the morning, because I'm gonna kick my own ass in the morning and I'm gonna push super hard. But if I have to go to a gym in the evening, I may skip it or I may just not do it. It's just my energy level is not the same. For sure, I'm not ready to push at the same level in the evening. The other thing I would love to touch on a little bit more is you had this journey and transition from allopathic medicine, working in the cancer world, right? Tell us a little bit about that and how did you transition or how did you find your way into this more holistic space?
so I've always had one foot in either door. The irony, as I mentioned, is as I was going through university, I became a fitness coach and a nutritionist through certifications just because I worked at the gym to help get me through university. And it was a way to make extra income. And I enjoyed it. It was fun, but it was never meant to be the end destination. I dreamed of that naive little girl growing up in the Caribbean wanting to save the world with cancer. So I've always had that straight and arrow thought process that I'm going to stick to cancer. I'm going to move to Canada. I'm going to get into the university of my choice there. I'm going to get into the number one hospital in North America that focuses on that. So I never wavered with that. I thought I was going to die as a radiation therapist. Like that was my ultimate goal.
What was drawing you to the cancer? Was somebody died in your family of
Yeah, I've
cancer?
grown up where I've lost a lot of relatives to it, and not having access to healthcare, it's not even that they couldn't get to it in time. It's just that at the time growing up, it just was not available. So having access to technology or treatment options was just not a possibility. So I've been around it my whole life and I've always known that inevitably it's going to be me one day. And I'm completely fine with that. It's never been something that I've been scared of. But I've grown up feeling helpless and that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to not see people suffer anymore. with it. So that was a large part of my motivation for chasing this career. And I have to say that I was in it for 17 years up until my very last day. I never regretted it. And I know that there is something within me that was working with patients has always been my calling. Maybe you call it a selfish need, but it always made me feel like I was doing the right thing. But I also felt misaligned. So throughout my time, I kept reverting back to nutrition coaching, health coaching on the side, and doing all of these different things that even so, when I went to do my master's, I did my master's in radiation oncology. I really had to bat to be like, can I focus on cancer and exercise for patients? And it took a while before they agreed, and they agreed, and I ended up becoming certified in that. But then unfortunately, I could never implement it. So that was my frustration is, I've got someone that's got head and neck cancer that has a tracheostomy and a G tube, and we're telling them go ahead and have, I don't know if you have Ensure or Boost, if you're familiar with that, but it's basically cans full of sugar. It's
Mm.
like, no, but we've got to be helping them on a different level. Like we can't just tell them eat whatever they want. So I started to really feel disconnected and misaligned. And ironically, when I made the decision to open up my own health company officially 3 years ago, and I came back in December, I started seeing patients that were younger than me, that were more late stage than me. And again, I'm not in a position to say I can diagnose, treat, or prognose or anything like that, but my thought process kept being on the repeat every day. But this is so avoidable. This is so avoidable. We could be doing so much more. And I thought that everybody knows this, but I didn't realize it's just a circle that I'm around. When I'm around other biohackers or other people in the longevity space, they have a better idea of what to do than most of them in conventional medicine or the average Joe. So for me, that missing link was they need to know I could be helping more people before it's too late. I don't want to be holding your hand when you're dying in your bed. I want to get you before you're at that point. So that was the main catalyst for me, other than, of course, almost being in the hospital from burnout. But I had already made my decision at that point to leave. That was just the extra icing on the cake that made me realize that I needed to truly pursue this path.
Hey there, Orshi here with a quick message. This is a brand new podcast, and I would love your help with growing our community. If you're finding this discussion valuable, I would be honored if you take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with a girlfriend or any woman in your life who might benefit from this information. Your support truly makes a difference. So, thank you for helping me spread the word. And now, let's get back to our conversation. So, you worked in this cancer space for 17 years. What are your takeaways for prevention? Now you're on the prevention side. What kind of advice can you give for women that want to prevent ever having to deal with cancer? Because cancer is a metabolic disease, and the root causes, as you said, so much of it comes down to those basic health optimization
Yeah.
advice that all the things I'm sure you're going to touch on. There's nothing like today to start taking action to prevent cancer. So, what would be like the top 5 things you would recommend women start doing now to prevent cancer?
Health is so personal. What's happening inside your body is so personal. Yes, we can eat healthy and we can exercise, but for lack of a better word, we're playing a guessing game. We don't really know. So I would say if that you're in a position to get some sort of functional testing or biomarker analysis, that would be the first step because then you could truly see where your deficiencies are. You can see different areas of your body that you can improve with. So if you're in a position to, go ahead and get started there. And from there, of course, food is medicine. Yes, that sounds so basic, but we all know this. However, when you talk to the average person and you see them, they know to eat healthy, but most of them, because we're tired and we're exhausted, it's just easier to grab that quick to go that's filled with processed stuff and sugar and all that. So conscientiously, if you're making the effort to live a healthier life, try to avoid the processed foods. Try to avoid the foods that have the glyphosates in them and the additives and all the other chemicals that are, quite frankly, no longer food. You're not nourishing your body. You're just sustaining satiety at that point.
I think people want to, they are trying To do that, I guess let's just give them some tools. Like, what are the things they can do to actually implement a healthier diet? So, for me, the things that come to mind is like meal prepping, being intentional grocery shopping, cooking your own meals. What are the suggestions that you give the clients that you work with? What are the things that people can do right now that don't cost any extra money, but is just being more intentional, prepared, so when you are hungry, you can just grab something from the fridge because it's already ready for you in a nice little
Hmm.
container and you just have to eat it. Versus being feel like I'm starving, my blood sugar is crashing, and now I'm just gonna grab whatever I can find.
Yeah, you hit the nail on its head. Preparation is key. And especially when you're exhausted and you're tired, you don't want to now think about going home and having to cook and what's in the fridge. So, part of the lifestyle of a high performer is lists. I love lists. I make them the night before. That way, the next day, I'm not overwhelmed. I make my to-do list of what I need to do, my top priorities. I make my grocery list. I make my meal plan for the week. So, again, let's talk about the habit stacking. You're sitting there, maybe for some people, they totally want to tune out, and I totally respect that. But let's say you're sitting there in front of your red light therapy, or better yet, if you're watching TV. You know what, guys? Let's do something healthy for yourself. Grab a pen and paper and start making your grocery list. Start organizing your meal plan. Preparation is absolutely the key, and it's going to help prevent failure. So that's a big one as well. It can be a bit challenging when you're cooking for multiple people in the household and you have to kind of cater to everybody else. But, if you kind of stick to the basics and then stack on there, okay, what's my protein source? Am I a vegan or am I eating animal based? Like, what's that going to be? What are my veggies? Make a list of the veggies. What are my carbs of my root vegetables? Am I going to do like a whole grain rice? And you kind of like sort of build on there. Oh, yeah, my daughter likes this. She loves having carrots. I'm going to throw some carrots in there. And you kind of like plan out that week and you try to make your meals so that it's not boring, but at the same time, you're not redundant making the same thing every day. You can kind of like play around with the same ingredient. So I love that you circled back to that. Preparation is absolutely key. Being a little bit mindful. I always tell my clients, if you go hardcore, you're going to fail. That's just the reality of it because you're going to feel like you're missing out. If Thanksgiving is coming around the corner, you don't want to feel like you're missing out on these meals of other people making all of these desserts that you love. So you have to find a way to have balance, but at the same time, if you plan ahead and you prepare and okay, well, Sunday night's family dinner, I can do this Monday to Saturday. I can organize it that way. And again, when you're making your list, you can substitute, okay, I love having, let's say you're someone who loves having a juice. Well, juice is pure sugar. Find an alternative. Maybe you can make it at home or another alternative drink that you can enjoy. Get your water maybe with an electrolytes, a healthier electrolytes that has that flavor for you. There's little tips that you can do to sort of tweak and manipulate how you're optimizing your meal.
Sometimes one of the things that I find always kind of funny when women that have a family and kids, they trying to plan meals around what their children wants to eat. And of course, kids want to eat the most palatable foods. That's not always the healthiest thing. So you have to be the one, the adult who understands like let's make high protein meals that are potentially low in sugar and whole foods the entire
Mhm.
family can eat. It's not like the children need these high sugar meals just because they are children. Like why not also give them vegetables and meat?
Mm,
Like I don't really get that. I think you as a parent have to walk the walk, and then your children will look up to you as an example and they will start eating those foods too. Their palate will change over time. Once their gut microbiome switches over time, they'll start craving those healthier meals and they'll be eating those too. Yes, the transition, you have to take it slowly, but you start sneaking in those healthier meals, and all of a sudden, your entire family is eating the same thing because as a mom, you may not have the time to prepare separate meals for your husband, for your children, and for yourself. And
mhm.
you shouldn't. You don't have the time for that. That was just my
Yeah.
small little tangent.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. I actually just had a client recently who was struggling with that, and I gave some recipes and things. She loves chocolate, and she loves chocolate chips, the whole 9 yards at night. typical cortisol peaking, you want to just junk out on food. And she was a bit worried. Her daughter's 5 or 6, was worried that her daughter wasn't going to be happy with the healthy switch. So one of the things that I had given her was an avocado, like cacao pudding. And she didn't think that her daughter noticed. And then her daughter, I guess, came to her a few days after and said, Mommy, can you put that green stuff in there? I like it. So she didn't even realize that children watch what parents are doing. She hadn't even noticed that her daughter watched her doing this, but inadvertently, because she saw like her mom enjoying this meal, it was like their bonding time in the evenings that they sat together,
Yeah.
especially summertime. They would sit by the lake doing this. She ended up loving it. So I think we need to give kids sometimes maybe a little bit more credit than we
Yes.
anticipate.
When I was young, I spent a lot of like the summers with my grandparents, and they cooked organ meats regularly. That was like part of our diet. And as a kid, that was just normal to eat those kind of things, right? Like the entire chicken went into the pot. I mean, every organ in it, So it's like that was so like we actually craved eating those foods as kids
Yeah.
because we didn't know any better. And so you eat what your parents, grandparents, whoever cooks for you, that's going to be your own normal. So
Hmm.
really the parents really need to be setting that good example.
I know I don't
Um,
want to say this because it's not really fair, but that's how I grew up. So I'm one of those weird people. I absolutely hate pizza. I hate cake. And people are like, how do you hate this stuff? I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do you crave? I'm like, honestly, I crave a mango and kale smoothie. Like, when I go down the grocery aisle to a fruit aisle, it's like heaven gates have opened up. But that's because I've grown up with that. And that's what my palate became really used to. I've
yeah.
never had McDonald's in my life. The idea of, I'm like, no. And they're like, don't you crave the smell? I'm like, no, when I smell it, I want to throw up. But again, that's me. And I don't want to judge anyone. You're free to do whatever you want. But my point is, this is what I was exposed to. So for me, the idea of eating pizza or cake is just weird.
And your palate can also change at any age, but giving your children an advantage if their palate sets on healthy foods, because then they'll have a much healthier life, their whole life, they'll be more prone to eating those foods. But if you didn't grow up with those parents that fed you healthy foods, it's okay. When you start eating healthy, you crave what you eat. So if
Hmm.
you never ate avocados before, you start eating avocados, you're going to start craving avocados after a while. Maybe
Hmm.
not tomorrow, but after your microbiome sort of switches over to something nutritious, your body starts craving it. So it's not never too late to start switching to a healthier diet.
Very true. Love
Yeah.
that. I think I personally underestimated the power of sleep. I used to say, I don't do this anymore, but I used to say I'll sleep when I'm dead. And I could survive on 3 hours sleep like nobody's business. So when I was doing my master's, working full time in the hospital, training for a CrossFit competition, this is what I was doing. And I absolutely do not recommend it because my body literally shut down. And I'm sure it's costed me years off of my life. But once I really started to understand the importance of sleep, it's not just sleeping 7 to 8 hours. That sounds lovely. There's so much more that goes into it. We want to make sure that we're hitting our deep sleep. We want to make sure that we're hitting our REM sleep. So having a consistent sleep schedule is so important. Trying going to bed at the same time every night and trying waking up at the same time every morning. Trying syncing your circadian rhythm if you can. That's why for me, the grounding in the morning is so important, being outside in the morning sunlight. Yes, I know some of us live in North America, but that doesn't matter. You're still getting that exposure. Maybe the light might not be the same as the sunshine intensity in the middle of the summer, but that's still super important to help with our circadian rhythm. So sleep.
During the winter time, we are naturally meant to sleep a little bit more and
Hmm.
rest a little bit more. So that is also not just the daily cycle, but it's also that yearly seasonal cycle. We
Hmm.
naturally tend to be up a little bit more and more active during the summer and sleep a little bit less. And during the winter, we have that little extra hibernation. We need to go into our cave and sleep more like a bear.
Which is
And
great.
exactly. And when it gets darker earlier, it's a great time to start going to bed earlier. And as I mentioned earlier, that for me, if I can shift my sleep even 30 minutes or an hour earlier, I get exponentially more deep sleep.
Hmm.
And on this point, I want to talk about sleep trackers and gadgets a little bit because like obviously sleep is a good place to start tracking. It's a good first place.
Hmm.
Because I think it's very hard to quantify sleep without it because we are not very good at judging how well we slept when we wake up in the morning, unless you really substantially slept less than normal. But otherwise, it's hard to tell. And once you have something that holds you accountable and there's some tracking going on, that's when really optimization come in. So tell me a little bit about your favorite trackers, gadgets. What do you use? What do you recommend for your clients?
My
Or
Aura ring. And I honestly, again, because I'm from the Caribbean and people can't really afford much, I do hesitate sometimes to recommend stuff. But I will say, with me trying to optimize my sleep, I was doing all the things, limiting device exposure, cool dark room, wearing an eye mask, I hardcore the mouth tape, all of it. And it wasn't until like I tested myself with and without my Aura ring. To be honest with you, a sleep tracker for me is next level. Like I'm not obsessed with it, but it really can help you understand your patterns a little bit more, understand what's happening. So for a long time, I couldn't understand. I'm like, why is my HRV so high? Like, yes, I know my nervous system's deregulated, but it was like little things like, oh my gosh, I'm eating like an hour before bed. I probably shouldn't be doing that. So there are little things that you can figure out as to, like I was waking up a lot. I couldn't figure out for the longest time. I'm waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning. That's when I was at the peak of my burnout. I didn't know I was in burnout. My tracker knew I was in burnout. So, yes, that's an extreme case, but I think it's good for someone who has no idea and maybe can afford to get it. It looks at how much deep sleep you're getting. It looks at how much REM sleep you're getting, how much light sleep you're getting, where you're waking up, how you're falling asleep. And you don't necessarily need to stick with Aura. There's Whoop, there's multiple other companies that are out there. So if you're in a position and you would like to learn how to optimize your sleep, your personal data, biohacking is personal. Having your personal data that can help you figure out how you can improve your lifestyle is next level.
And you mentioned HRV, so the higher numbers are the better, and the lower numbers is when you are more burned out. And with heart rate variability, it's one of the things you can track on the Oura Ring that is an amazing data for resiliency. And since kind of circling back to our topic of stress resiliency, it's one of those markers that can really be predictive also of burnout coming. If you start seeing that HRV tanking, you have to realize like, okay, I need more self-care. I need to bring those habits back.
Hmm.
And just to tie off that conversation real quick, because we were talking about nutrition and sleep, and really I think a lot of the takeaways are habit stacking, and making it part of your lifestyle. These are not some things that you do once in a while. It's something that you do every day. It's part of the structure of your day. You make time for it.
Hmm.
You actually have to figure out how to incorporate it into your everyday lifestyle because anything that you're not doing on a consistent basis, it's gonna disappear from your life. There are maybe certain things you do 3 times a week. Maybe you don't lift weights every day, or some people do, but things like sleep optimization is a daily habit. Your nutrition is a daily habit. Just to go back to gadgets, is there anything else? You mentioned you have a red light panel. Is there any other gadgets that you utilize or love, or even if you don't have, you wish you had?
To be honest, I would love to invest in some type of meditation type tool, even like the brain tap, something like that. Again, because I am that person that has the hardest time disconnecting, that would be something that I would be looking at getting. And then just recently, I just came out from a conference where they had like this apparatus that can help measure your breath. So I don't know about many people, but the high performers that I've been around, we tend to breathe like multiple breaths per minute. And instead of slowing it down, and having longer, slower breaths has actually been linked to increased longevity. So, not to mention better on your nervous system. So, it's having something that can sort of help me slow it down. Like I'm trying to do it right now on my own, and it's not quite the same as having an apparatus like that. So it's not for everybody, but for someone like myself, I'm at the point in my life where my nervous system has been operating at fight or flight for 17, 18 years. And I just suffered severe burnout. It's not going to be cured in 2, 3 months. It's going to take quite some time. So this is something that for me would be of interest in understanding again. Like I was shocked that your breaths are correlated to your longevity. Like I
Yeah.
did not realize that.
Our ability to switch between the sympathetic and parasympathetic state and go into that rest and recover, rest and digest
Mhm.
state and get out of that chronic stress is so incredibly important for our resilience. And whatever tool, so many tools that are free. So meditation is free, breath work is free, the binaural beats are free.
Mhm.
There's so many things that people can do that doesn't cost any money, but some of these gadgets and devices can be incredibly helpful for certain people. So you kind of have to sample and see what works for you, right?
Yeah,
But
for
maybe a
sure.
good beginner tool is just to start with something like a sleep tracker, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
that is a very low-hanging fruit for everybody because there's such a big payoff there. If you can optimize your sleep, you are definitely increasing your stress resiliency.
Did
I
I?
forgot to ask you or circle back to the cold therapy
Oh,
and how
yes.
that's different for women. Yeah, let's talk about that briefly.
I will say cold therapy is not for everyone. And I will say, even if you are someone who loves cold therapy, it's not for you every day, as a female, especially, sometimes even as a male. So I coach in contrast space. I coach in a sauna and in a cold plunge. And I will say that there are lots of things that anecdotally I've learned over the years. I've coached thousands of people at this point. Research is lacking, especially for women. So, what is interesting is someone like myself, because I am a high functioning person who struggles with meditation, my nervous system's deregulated, that getting into the cold for some people can trigger them. For me, because I'm operating in a place where I'm in fight or flight, I also, disclaimer, understand breath work. So if I'm able to incorporate that breath work in the cold, it's one of the few places that for me, I zone out. My brain is at a standstill, but I always coach listen to your body, but still the mind. There are some people, however, when you are in burnout or your nervous system's deregulated, your body is not going to know the difference sometimes. An extreme example, but a gun being held to your head versus going into the extreme cold. You're going into fight or flight. You're going into panic. So for some people, they cannot handle it, and I do not recommend unless you are regulated. So that's why I say it just depends on where you are at. Like your actual wiring is a whole nother layer that's added on top of your hormones, where you are in your cycle, your stress levels, how much you've slept, whether you drank the night before, all of these different factors. So there's multiple things that come into it. But if you are feeling in a position where you feel confident that you can do this and you are someone who enjoys it, or you're in a situation where you're able to get proper coaching with it, it can be quite effective for that.
All right, so just to wrap it up with the last question, Jessy, what's your personal definition of living an optimized life, and how can women move closer to that ideal?
I believe that it's not how long you live, or not necessarily how amazing every single day is. It's just that you're doing your best to maximize how much energy, how much productivity, how much that you talked about that rain barrel, how much you're doing to lessen the load of the rain barrel so that you can maximize your health span. You can maximize your muscle span. You can maximize how much you're able to give back to the world, to yourself, and to your family. And all of that is personal. It's personal based on your genetics, it's personal based on your wiring, and it's personal based on your lifestyle.
Well, Jessy, how can people find you, get in touch with you, reach out to you, tell us?
I am on social media, appropriately called Integrative Biohacker. And also, my website is naimahealthconsultancy.com.
Hey, that's a wrap for today. But before we go, I want to share something I've been diving into recently. The best way to use GLP-1s like semaglutide, known as Ozempic or Wegovy, and tirzepatide, also called Mounjaro. These powerful weight loss peptides have become widely used over the past few years, but there's also been a flood of misinformation on how to use them safely and effectively. I made my own share of mistakes over the past few years, learning through trial and error as I work to improve my own metabolic health. I want to give you the shortcut to help you avoid these pitfalls so you can use these peptides more effectively. That's why I created a free mini course to give you the blueprint for using GLP-1s for body recomposition the right way. I will cover optimal dosing strategies, important lifestyle and hormone optimization steps, all of which can help you avoid plateaus and eventually taper off these peptides safely once your goals are reached. Now, to access this free mini video course, just scroll down to the show notes and dive right in. It's all there waiting for you. And remember, this podcast is for informational purposes only, and it is not a substitute for professional medical advice.